I want to talk about why Netflix's Travelers has one of the best pilots that I've ever seen. First off, Travelers, one of my favorite shows. Well, I think it's one of the best shows ever made, just in terms of consistency's sake. It's really good throughout all 3 seasons, and I enjoyed the entire thing. I don't think it lulled in any places. I think it was a fantastic show, and I think its pilot does an excellent job representing that show. It's a lot of pilots are pretty tropey, and they give you a barely surface level introduction to some of the characters, but in a show with 5 characters, it can be hard to understand 5 characters. But in the first episode of Travelers, you meet all 5 of the main team of this particular group of travelers, and every single one of them gets a special introduction, and the way that they are introduced, every single character, they are introduced at the TEL, or the time, elevation, latitude, longitude of their reported death of their host, and every single one of them, the circumstances in which they were supposed to die indicates almost all you need to know about those people's lives and situations. I think the best example for this is Trevor, who's the engineer for the team. The host, Trevor, he was a high school kid, football jock, and just kind of a dude, guy being a dude, and he was in a cage match for underground boxing or kickboxing, whatever, but he was obviously the kind of guy that was not gonna stay down, and he kept getting back up in a fight that he shouldn't have been in. Took one too many to the head, and just before he died, he was traveled into by the engineer for the team, and he conceded the fight and walked out of there with non-lethal brain damage, I guess. But after that, then he left the fight, and his friend was really confused because he was with a friend and wasn't a very good friend. But that introduction just kind of showed you he was the traveler that was the engineer for the team, he was entering into a host who was kind of a troublemaker and not very smart. But it sets up later in the episode that he goes home and I believe it meets his girlfriend, and the girlfriend is very shocked that he doesn't act like himself at all. The traveler that enters him as a host is much different than Trevor that he was, and his parents notice it. A counselor at school notices it very quickly, and it's just, I think he's probably the easiest to describe example and the most plain, because high school jock is a pretty played out trope, and it's one that's been done over and over and over, but not many times in that story does high school jock. He died. The man who was Trevor died when the traveler entered his mind and took over his host body, but he died, and the traveler resumed his life where he was, and it's very prevalent that it is no longer the Trevor, and everybody in his life knows that it's not the same person. They can't comprehend that it's actually a different person, but is like a light switch, instant changes are made, and he immediately resumes his duties and kind of gets Trevor's life on track. In the first couple episodes, he goes on to like straighten out his life, get his grades straight, like start treating his parents with more respect, and like he like ditches the toxic girlfriend. Like he goes, like in the span of like 4 episodes, he goes from like stereotypical jock high school guy with no brain cells into like kid who's trying to get his shit together. And like from the outside perspective, that's a massive change, and that is something that Travelers handles very well and makes feel smooth, even though it's for everybody around, and like it helps you like process in a realistic sense the characters changes like from the people in their lives perspectives. Like in Marcy's case, how David was so dumbfounded at all the changes, like he's kind of like with the viewer at that point, that like he's kind of grounding the show and helping understand that none of this is like realistic. Like things like this can't happen, but like we the viewer get to view. We remain grounded through the onlookers in the Travelers' lives. The only ones that don't really have like people in their lives are McLaren, who his wife is not a very prevalent character in the first few episodes, and Carly's case, her deadbeat baby daddy, he's not a very important character as of yet. He is definitely building in to be like a minor villain or minor protagonist, which is another great thing the show does. It has really good build-up to its plot points, and yeah, just the pilot episode does an incredible job of like, it shows each and every character's entry point into their host lives, and it gives you a good, like the whole like concept of traveling. Like in case you didn't understand it the first time, you get to see it 4 other times. Like it drives home like the main concept of the show. It has the characters give some brief sympathy exposition to McLaren before he is traveled into, just to kind of, it's a little bit of an exposition dump, but it feels natural in the show, because they don't outright say anything up until that point. And like in the following episodes, the only ones that like plainly stated are the historian of the team, whose name escapes me at the moment. I feel really bad. He's my favorite character, but can't remember his name. The guy with the long hair, the historian, him and the lawyer go around like securing assets for the team, like the hideout and like the funds needed to acquire all of their equipment. And he tells plainly the lawyer, because the lawyer knows that he's a junkie. His host was a junkie and has like drug addictions and is a drug user, so that kind of like ruins his credibility. And like with the absurdity of how he says like we're financing a secret hideout, or we're buying a safe house for time travelers, nobody's gonna believe that or take that at face value, but he's really just being honest with the guy. And it's a really like funny but accurate like jab at the show's nature, and like how it's a little ridiculous, but then again like they make it fit, and it works and it flows smoothly together. So it's a magnificent pilot, and it does an excellent job at like introducing all 5 characters, giving them an objective, and like introducing a viewer into the world that is Travelers, and like what the concept of the show is. Like, it doesn't jump straight into the madness, which the show eventually gets into. And I believe the second episode goes straight into, like, antimatter explosions. But in the first pilot episode, it doesn't go super heavy sci-fi. It's just people who essentially experience a hard reset and then have to live new lives and then also accomplish a sci-fi task. But, I find more joy in the stories of the hosts than in the actual traveler business, because the traveler business, it's hard to understand and the characters aren't meant to understand it at first. They're sent with pretty limited information and they are given mission objectives like piece by piece as the show goes on, so they don't begin to understand the whole picture until much later on. So, like, especially early on in the show, and I think mostly in the pilot, the characters are the focus of the show and, like, the most important part of Travelers is not the travelers themselves, but the hosts they inhabit and, like, how they resume their lives, which is Protocol 3, I think, in their protocols. Resume the host life. And that's my unscripted description and explanation rant, kind of, about why I enjoy Netflix Travelers' pilot so much and why I think it's a great pilot. I think it's one of the best pilots I've ever seen. Like, to compare it to something else, like the pilot of the show Community, which is a much different show, but it's a show similar in the sense that it has a group of main characters. In the first episode of Community, like, they introduce the tropes and, like, the surface level of all of the characters, like, very briefly, and, like, it's a half the length of the Travelers episode, but they just kind of gloss over all the characters, introduce the scene, and then kind of, like, set up Jeff Winger's, like, purpose and goal. But in Travelers, they all share a common goal. They give more than a surface level scratch on the hosts, at least. The Travelers, there's much more to uncover, but their lives are way more than surface level deep, and, like, even that gets hinted at with, like, Carly and McLaren. They share a couple glances and, like, looks of longing to allude to feelings that they can't quite show or be seen on the surface in their new bodies. But it also, like, it sets up the purpose and direction of every character and every host's life, and, like, provides challenges and, like, ways that they're going to overcome them already. In Carly's case, she's dropped into, like, an unhealthy relationship with an abusive partner and a child, and it shows quickly how she's going to manage having a child, or have to juggle having a child, in conjunction with the fact that she's a traveler and, like, having traveler duties. And she just kind of, like, kicks the living shit out of her abusive partner and tells him to get out, and it kind of sets up the struggle between those two characters. And it does show him coming back in the first episode, I believe, that he's not just going to lie down and take it, but it's going to be a continuous struggle between those two characters as they both fight to kind of run the show. But it does an excellent job on just, like, the wow factor of, like, wow, this show's really cool, and, like, can't wait to see what they do with all these characters, but, like, I can't wait to figure out all the stuff that they're not even showing or not introducing yet. Like, there's a lot to be discovered, even though the pilot does give you a lot of information in itself, and, like, it's a pretty comprehensive. It's an hour-long episode, which there aren't many of those around anymore. The show's a little bit older, a couple of years, but there's not too many good hour-long shows anymore that can give you like a comprehensive and like digestible episode that can be as equally as engaging throughout. And it does a fantastic job. It did a fantastic job hooking me in for the entire series, and even upon rewatch, like the pilot episode is one of the things I get the most excited for, is just reintroducing myself to the characters in such a just a great way to like dive back in. It's like the pilot's a good little healthy dose of like it's a good balance of all the things that you could possibly want in a TV show. Like it's a little bit of everything you need to know, some stuff you want to know, and a lot of like interesting action and hook to keep you interested and prevent you from clicking away and letting the next episode play on auto, as it does most times. You don't have to tune in for next week. It's all out. The show is completed, so there's no waiting. You could watch it as fast as you could, which would take several days, I believe. It's gotta be. It's a good show. It has a lot of material, and you can enjoy it for a good while before it's over. Thanks for listening to my unscripted rant. Neat.